Hi, Mr. More Sewing here, and today we're going to talk about getting the tension right on your sewing machine, top and bottom, because obviously I'm sure you've realised if you can't get the tension right you can't produce a good lock stitch, which is what your machine does, and the stitches come apart or they look really puckered and horrible. A lot of people start adjusting the top number on their machine because they can see that tension dial, but what not a lot of people realise is there's actually also tension settings in your bobbin cases, which we'll talk about and how to get that right. First of all, we're going to talk about what good tension looks like, and it should look like this. So you should see a very neat, even, straight stitch. Feels smooth when you touch it top and bottom, doesn't feel bumpy. And the zigzag stitch should be even front and back. You might get a little pull on the fabric sometimes. I'm holding one up here and you'll see a closer picture of it, but that's because the threads are so strong that they can actually pull the weaves of the fabric together. You can iron that out, or you can open out the width of the zigzag stitch, make it wider so it opens out a bit. To show you an example of what bad tension can do to your stitches, well, you can see here that although the straight stitch looks quite nice, it feels bumpy, and you can pull the thread out and you can actually literally undo the whole stitch and come apart. Don't want to do that when you're making something. The other thing you'll notice is the zigzag pulls on one side underneath, pulls together. So you can see that effectively one set of tension is too tight and one set of tension is too loose, because you want them to be in balance. And that's the whole thing about setting the tension on your sewing machine. It's because you've got two lots of tension, one at the top, one at the bottom. They need to be in balance. A good idea to do once a year or so is to actually clean your top tension discs, which you can, let me move this over a bit, which is here. Your tension discs on modern sewing machines are generally here and your thread passes through them. So to clean them, you just need a piece of fabric, a strip of old fabric. It's got to be good stuff, but a strip of fabric. And you just push it down into the groove, into the slot where the thread would go, so it goes between the plates of the tension disc. Move it backwards and forwards a few times and pull it out. And what you might find is it actually ends up, the first time you do it, if you've not done it before, you might find there's some marks on the fabric as you pull it out, and that's basically the grot and the grease and stuff that gets in between these discs. And the reason I suggest you clean the tension discs at all is because anything that's between those two tension discs, the metal discs that are inside the tension unit, and they're the things that actually snap together and pinch your thread when you put the presser foot down and actually apply the tension to the thread. Anything that gets between those will stop the tension from working properly. So any bits of loose lint, any bits of old thread, even grit or grease can stop those tension discs from working properly. So it's a good idea every year or so. You don't have to do it every time you change your thread, but every year or so maybe just do that. Just clean your tension discs quickly, keep them in sparkly tip-top condition. So once you've done that, fresh needle, always a good idea, particularly if you've been sewing for a while, because that can affect the tension on the fabric, which is also something else you have to think about, but we're not going to get into that today. So, but keep the old needle, and there's a reason for that. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then thread your machine up as you would do normally. Obviously with the presser foot up, because that opens the tension discs, and you want the thread to pass into the tension disc when you put the presser foot down. And you can test that. Is once you've threaded the machine, if you put the presser foot down and you pull the thread after you've put it through the needle and it runs free, the thread's not sitting in the tension discs. You need it to have some resistance. Either that or your tension is set very low and it's running freely, which we can talk about in a minute. But yeah, always thread your machine with the presser foot up because it opens the tension discs. And once you've actually got the thread in the needle, put your presser foot down because you're good to go. And then there's tension on the thread. What you're looking for with your top tension is what's called needle whip. And basically what that means is that when you pull the thread through the eye of the needle, when it's threaded up with the presser foot down, the needle will move slightly, it will bend slightly. That means there's sufficient tension in the thread. If it runs too free, that means you haven't got sufficient tension in the thread, or the thread's not sitting in the tension disc. Check that. Or if it barely moves at all, or actually snaps, then you've got too much tension. And you need somewhere between. You need the thread to move, but under resistance, effectively. Enough resistance to make the needle just bend ever so slightly. Needle whip. So the way to get that is if your thread is running too free and your tension is too low, move the number on the tension dial up by 1 and test, pull again. Still not right, do it by another number. Just keep slowly adjusting it slightly and slightly until you get that needle whip, the needle moving. Likewise, if the thread breaks or it just won't move because your tension is too high, bring it down a number each time until you get that needle whip. Now some people keep thinking, oh, I must go to the middle number on the tension dial. All the tension dial is an adjuster for a big spring that pushes those two metal plates together. So you can't always rely on it being exactly in the middle. I've had machines when I've been servicing them, some with a perfectly adequate tension set at number 2 and some with a perfectly adequate tension set at number 7 or 8. Depends on the age of machine, depends on the make, but don't get too worked up about the fact that it must be in the midpoint. It just needs to be right. So get it to where you need it to be, that you get this needle whip. And then your top thread is tensioned properly. Now we're going to talk about tensioning on the bottom of the machine, where the thread goes in the bobbin. Now you'll have all machines really, domestic sewing machines, have 2 types of bobbin. You have what's called a front loader bobbin, which is the metal case. You probably all recognise that. You've either got it or have used a machine with it before. And actually what the other one, which is called a top loader, you probably don't realise this, but there is actually a bobbin case in that machine as well, and it's the black plastic thing that you drop the thread into. Yeah, and both of these have a screw on them, allows you to adjust the tension on the case, which passes on to the thread. So we'll talk about the front loader first. And what you're really looking for is, if the tension is correct, you should be able to thread the bobbin case up, pull the thread up, hold it up, and then as you jiggle it, as you bounce it up and down, the case will slowly move down into your hand. That's sufficient tension in the thread. If you thread it up and you threaded it up properly and you pull the thread through and you let it go and the bobbin case just drops away, too loose. If it won't move at all, too tight. And if that's the case for either one of those, what you have on the bobbin, I'll show you a closer picture, but what you have on the bobbin case is a little screw, and that adjusts the clip. Now before you do that, particularly if it's an older machine, remember earlier I said about keeping your needle, one of the things you can do is take that needle and gently push it under the clip and just wiggle it around a bit. Because again, like cleaning the top tension disc, if you get anything caught under that clip, particularly an old piece of snapped thread, then the tension will not work properly, and it doesn't matter what you do. So assuming that's clean and it's good to go, what you can do is with that screw is, if your tension is too loose, tighten it 1/4 to 1/2 a turn, test dropping it again, keep going until it drops down towards your hand. That means there's tension in it. Likewise, if it's too tight, loosen it off 1/4 to 1/2 a turn, keep doing it until it drops into your hand. Now I must warn you, be really careful, particularly if you're loosening this off. Don't over loosen it, your own peril. 1/4 turn you should be fine, because if that pops out, you can get it back in, but believe me, it's a devil to find. That screw's tiny, so I'd really rather you didn't do that. Just 1/4 turn each time, test it, 1/4 turn each time, test it, and in the end you should have the tension correct on your machine. Brilliant. Talking about a top loading machine that uses a bobbin case like this, you'll notice that on a lot of these bobbin cases, if you ever take it out of the machine, and that's another thing, you have to take the needle plate off, but actually a lot of them actually preset the tension in the factory, and you'll notice that little orange dot, there's a little piece of orange paint or putty they put over the screw to stop you adjusting it. And most of the time, I'll be honest with you, you don't need to adjust the tension on a top loading machine. It's hard to judge. I'm going to show you some examples of when it's too loose. If it just really runs too loose, then there's obviously no tension in the thread. But you can't do that jiggy thing to make it drop down into your hand, because it will just fall out of the case. So it's all about feel, and you want some resistance in the thread. If you feel you're really pulling to get it to move to the point where actually you might even move the case if you put it on the table and pull, then you've probably got too much tension. If you can just pull handfuls of thread through and it doesn't you feel no resistance at all, then you've got not enough. And again, likewise, what you can do, you might have to take that putty out with your, I suggest the old sewing machine needle again. You just peel it out and there's a little screw in there, and you can just, again, adjust that quarter of a turn. If it's too loose, tighten it up quarter of a turn. If the thread is too tight, lower it a quarter of a turn, loosen it off. And you want to get to the point where you can feel some resistance, but not a lot. But that will mean it's fine. But most of the time, this will be fine. You can also clean the tension clip in this. Again, with your sewing machine needle, just gently poke it in, just to make sure there's nothing caught in there. You'd be amazed how many times, I know people probably think, well, that's never been a problem. I've serviced hundreds of machines, and it's really weird how often there's something caught in the machine that's so tiny even I didn't see it the first time. And you go through all the checks and balances, you think, this isn't tension, is the case broken, have I got to do something with it, is the screw, has it been stripped, well, it's been under tension, all that nonsense. And in the end, I've cleaned it out with an old needle or an old pin, and there's a tiny little piece of thread, and suddenly everything's working again. It's amazing. They're quite robust machines, but it doesn't take much for them not to sew properly. So once you've got that feel, that resistance, which you might not have to adjust, but you know how to do it now if you do need to, then your tension is set top and bottom, and you can do a test stitch. And I always suggest you do a test stitch, straight stitch and a zigzag. And then, like I showed you before, pull on the threads. If they look all right, pull on the threads, particularly the bottom thread, because on a lock stitch, the top thread, the one on your needle, actually loops round the bottom thread and pulls it, and that's where your resistance comes from on your straight stitch. And if there isn't enough resistance there, not enough tension there, you can pull the bottom thread out, or at least make it pull together the whole thing. That means you haven't got the tension quite right, it just needs a slight adjustment, a little bit loose, just bring it up a bit. On the zigzag, you want it to look even front and back, even it's slightly making the fabric pull slightly. But what you don't want is for one side to be pulling the other threads into it, so it looks almost, at its worst, the bottom of a zigzag stitch can almost look like a straight thread. And again, if you've got hold of that, you could probably pull that out as well, but it's certainly not right. And you just need to adjust that back. So it can be a little bit fiddly, quarter turns, might take up a little bit of fabric, but once you've got those two tensions in balance, you're good to go. And your machine's sewing properly, which is what you're after. Anyway, I hope you found that really useful. Happy to answer any questions. Give us a like, give us a follow. There's going to be plenty more of these kind of videos coming out, really about trying to help you guys really understand your machines and not get frustrated with them and sew properly. And we've got lots of plans, lots of ideas for different tutorials and just helps and reviews and things like that. So yeah, always happy to help, always happy to answer questions, and happy sewing.